Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session. My name is Surin Jamiana, and I'm a program manager on the Azure Firewall product group.
Hi, I'm Gopikrishna Kannan. I'm a senior product manager in the Azure networking team.
The growth this year has been amazing, and today we'll start with what and how Azure Firewall and Azure Firewall Manager can do to protect your network and share some exciting new capabilities. For background, Azure Networking has many services that fall under the Connect, Protect, Deliver, and Monitor pillars. Azure Firewall and Azure Firewall Manager are part of the Protect pillar, alongside with DDoS protection, web application firewall, network security groups, and service endpoints and private link. To dive in deeper, Azure Firewall is a fully managed cloud-based firewall that protects your Azure resources, including your applications, virtual machines, and storage databases. With Azure Firewall, you can create firewall rules that filters incoming or outgoing traffic using network, NAT, and application layer filtering. Your Azure Firewall can then filter this traffic that is traveling from the internet, going between your servers, or between your on-prem and Azure environments. Using the power of the cloud, Azure Firewall has built-in high availability, meaning that when you deploy a firewall, and if one instance or region goes down, there's always a backup handy with zero downtime. The firewall can also auto-scale based off of your traffic patterns, or in other words, in CPU and throughput for up to 30 gigabits per second. The service also provides logging capabilities to monitor your traffic. Finally, Azure Firewall is best for going Azure native, as we have thorough Microsoft integration with Azure PaaS services such as Microsoft's Threat Intel Feed, FQDN tags, and much more. To build on the product, Azure Firewall has new capabilities based on customer feedback and security trends. To start, Azure Firewall now has a Windows Virtual Desktop FQDN tag to simplify your outbound access to your WVD deployments. This is helpful for protecting remote sessions. With native force tunneling, you can now stack a second firewall on top of Azure Firewall before going directly to the internet for extra protection. Auto stack configuration can enhance this. For today, I'm going to demo the new features highlighted in bold. Let's take a look into IP groups. IP groups allow you to group multiple IP addresses and then use them in Azure Firewall rules. This is helpful to avoid typing every individual IP address repeatedly. In my mind, this is similar to creating a group chat on my phone, so I don't have to remember all my friends' phone numbers. Here, I'm going to create an IP group that represents all the IP addresses in my education department as an example. Next, I'm going to simply add my IP addresses that belong to this group. I can also use the import from file feature in case if I have a large file of my IP addresses, and then create. I can then use this IP group across regions and subscriptions. Next, Azure Firewall has new DNS capabilities, including custom DNS, DNS Proxy, and which allows you to use FQDNs and network rules for all ports and protocols. In the demo, this is the layout that I want to achieve. I want my DNS traffic from my VM to directly travel through Azure Firewall so that I can initiate a DNS resolution query to my own DNS server instead of using Azure DNS. Enabling DNS Proxy will also allow me to use FQDNs and network rules. This setup requires 3 steps. First, in Azure Firewall DNS settings, I can enable my DNS proxy. I'm going to then enter my custom DNS server IP address that I want my Azure Firewall to point to. To ensure that DNS traffic is directed to the firewall, I must configure the firewall's private IP address as my custom DNS server in my VNet DNS server settings as well, which completes the picture. In other words, I now have my VM using my firewall as a proxy, which is now also using my own DNS server. Now with DNS proxy enabled, I can use FQDNs and network rules based on DNS resolution. This allows me to use any port or protocol other than HTTPS or MS SQL. Here, I'm creating a network rule to allow NTP traffic to time.windows.com, while also using my handy education department IP group that I created earlier as my source. We also became HIPAA compliant for our health sectors and recently certified by ICSA Labs. Azure continues to drive as the most compliant cloud, and these new certifications on Azure Firewall are what we aim to ensure. Now, as more organizations are growing with more workloads, each may require the exact same or different set of rules. As a result, I might need multiple firewalls. And with scale, managing multiple firewalls can then become tedious and prone to error. To solve this, Azure now has a centralized management service. This service is Azure Firewall Manager. With Azure Firewall Manager, you can now deploy and view all of your firewalls in one location. Instead of creating rules locally for each individual firewall, you can now create a firewall policy, which is essentially a set of rules that can be reused and attached to multiple firewalls. This is a time saver if you want to avoid creating the same rules repeatedly. When you use Azure Firewall Manager, a firewall can be automatically deployed in two architectures that I will review next. In addition, you can delegate admin rules to different teams or users as opposed to an individual manager for a hierarchical approach. This allows you to respond to new threats strategically. As mentioned, Azure Firewall can now streamline two deployment architectures: Hub Virtual Network and Secured Virtual Hub. We use the term hub to signify where the Azure Firewall lives, its home. In the Hub Virtual Network, a firewall can be automatically deployed in a VNet. Here I have two hub VNets in West US and East US, each with a peered VNet. To simplify rule management, I can create a policy and attach it not only to West US, but also East US. Similarly, the second architecture is a secured virtual hub. The secured virtual hub is valuable if you want to deploy an Azure Firewall in a vWAN. If my East US has additional rules that are different than the original policy, I can also add a child policy for additional granularity. The vWAN structure has automated routing and can support third-party firewalls connected as an edge site. Azure Firewall Manager is now GA and has expanded with new scenarios and capabilities. This includes more third-party support and multiple public IP support. The new features brought in the standalone feature firewall that I reviewed earlier has also been brought to firewall policy, which includes IP groups, custom DNS, DNS proxy, FQDNs and network rules, and an allow list for threat intelligence. Now I'm going to hand it over to Gopi, who's going to illustrate the power and ease of Azure Firewall Manager and firewall policy.
Thank you, Suren. Let's quickly look into how organizations can migrate to firewall policy with a short demo. A typical enterprise comprises of multiple application teams and a central IT security team. Both teams have different goals. For instance, the IT security team need to enforce compliance and consistency across firewall deployments. On the other hand, application teams desire agility and flexibility for rapid deployments. Typically, application team would like to punch holes in the firewall to allow newly deployed application traffic and integrate with their CI/CD pipeline. This requires a balancing act. The firewall policy was built to help with this scenario. Another key consideration for production deployments is migration. You cannot afford downtime. The good news is that you can migrate your existing Azure Firewall deployments to firewall policy without incurring downtime and with the convenience of Firewall Manager UI. In this demo, we are going to migrate the database firewall rules to the policy. Let's begin with reviewing the database firewall rules. Notice that the network rule collection has network rules. Next, There are 2 application rule collections with 7 rules each. Now let's launch the Firewall Manager to create a policy with rules from the database firewall imported. We'll use the Create Azure Policy workflow, which provides a simple interface to create and attach a firewall policy. We are going to create the firewall policy in East US. Note, a policy can be in East US but apply to firewalls in any region. The database firewall policy inherits from the IT admin defined security policy. Base policy always takes precedence over child policy. Notice there are 10 rules inherited from the base policy. Next, let's import the existing rules from the database firewall. As you can see, the threat intel is already set to the highest level of alert and deny. The configuration was inherited from the base policy. Let's apply the firewall policy to the database firewall. This has the effect of removing all the existing rules and snapping the newly created firewall policy. That's it. We are now ready to complete. Now that the policy is created, let's set up access control using custom RBAC role. For the sake of this demo, we have pre-created a custom RBAC role which provide write access to rule collection group in the database firewall. Let's assign users to the role. Now you can see that the role assignment has been successfully completed. We can now go to the database firewall, which has been fully migrated from rules to firewall policy. Notice it has Firewall Manager. Now you can edit the rules by accessing the firewall policy from the Firewall Manager UI or from the Firewall Policy resource page. We will now show how to secure internet traffic right at the Azure edge using Firewall Manager. With vWAN, you have a managed connectivity experience. Secure Virtual Hub adds a managed security solution on top of this. It helps you build the DMZ in Azure in 3 different ways. Number 1, you can easily attract traffic to your firewall from both virtual networks and branch offices connected to the hub. Number 2, secure traffic between VNets to branch offices and breakout to the internet with just a few clicks. Number 3, you can deploy security as a solution offering from any of our partners like Zscaler, Checkpoint, and iBoss to secure your internet breakout traffic. In June, both the Firewall Manager and the Secure Virtual Hub offering went GA. Along with this, Zscaler integration also reached the GA milestone. Today, I'm going to demonstrate the Zscaler integration. Now let's launch the Firewall Manager and review the hub to be secured by the third-party provider. In this case, it's going to be Zscaler. Notice that the Hub 01 has Azure Firewall already deployed to secure the east-west traffic. The security configuration provides the list of connections to the hub. Notice we have 2 VNets and 1 branch connection to the hub. Now, let's add the third-party provider to the hub. In this demo, we are adding Zscaler. However, you can explore other third-party providers like Checkpoint and iBoss as well. While it's getting created, let's create an Active Directory security principal. The security principal will be used by Zscaler to access the hub. The same approach is utilized by other third-party partners to access the hub. We also need to create a secret key to set up the Active Directory security principal configuration. Now that we have configured the Active Directory security principal, we have to set up permissions allowing the Active Directory security principal to access the hub resource group. We add the Active Directory security principal as a contributor to the hub. Now, what we will do is copy the Active Directory security principal detail. We need this to key in the information for third party to connect. Browse to the Zscaler admin portal, authenticate, and then we will click on Partner Integration to enter the Active Directory security principal details. Notice that I have entered the details and it's now authenticating to the Azure, and once the authentication is successful, it would automatically detect the hub for which it has access. As you can see, there is one hub site. Let's click on the hub site to verify that Zscaler has been able to set up the tunnel successfully. Notice that the tunnel status is now showing connected. That means the Zscaler has been able to establish the tunnel fully to the hub. Let's now refresh the virtual hub to enable internet breakout using Zscaler. We visit the security configuration and modify the internet access to be secured via Zscaler and hit save. Notice that the spoke internet traffic is now secured using Zscaler. Let's now secure the branch internet traffic. Now, let's hit refresh to confirm that the hub's internet breakout is secured by Zscaler. There you go. All the hub connections are now secured with Zscaler. So this concludes our demo today. Now let's review Azure Firewall pricing. Azure Firewall pricing has two costs. There's a fixed cost of $1.25 per hour and a variable data processing charge for every gigabyte transferred. In addition to Azure Firewall charges, Azure Firewall Manager has a charge of $100 per region per policy per month and a cost of 40 cents an hour for 3P integration. In conclusion, Azure Firewall was created with Azure customer needs in mind. You can also use Azure Firewall for securing traffic in a hybrid network between on-prem and Azure, filter egress traffic to the internet, and secure Microsoft PaaS services. It's certified by leading external agencies. You can also use Azure Firewall Manager to centrally deploy and manage your organization firewalls. Here are some documentation links to help you get started. Hope you enjoyed the demo and thanks for watching. Thank you, Suren, for co-presenting this session.
Thank you, Gopi, and thanks everybody.